Welcome. My name's Colette Willoughby. I'm the Director of Asbestos Compliance, but I'm also the Principal Examiner for Asbestos for the British Occupational Hygiene Society, with responsibility for ensuring that asbestos training and qualifications are fit for purpose and are maintained up to date. I'd like to take this opportunity to talk to you about some new developments that we've planned and are in the process of rolling out within BoHS. If we have a look at some of the facts, over 5,000 people currently die each year from asbestos-related diseases. That's an astonishing number, and it's a number that unfortunately is still increasing. We've had that death rate for quite a few years, so I'm sure you can appreciate it is a considerable sum. If we look back at the time period between the 1950s and the 1970s, asbestos was used extensively in the UK as a general building material. Now, as a result, we still have thousands of tons of asbestos within our buildings across the whole of the country. Asbestos is not an old issue. Asbestos is an issue that is still current and is causing problems nowadays, and unfortunately will continue to cause problems well into the future. It's reported that we have over 1.5 million commercial premises that actually still contain asbestos, and that's without even considering all the domestic properties that also contain asbestos. Now, if we have a look at our framework that we have in place at the moment, we have the Control of Asbestos Regulations, which specifically deal with trying to manage asbestos risks, primarily to try and reduce the number of deaths that we still see each year, year on year within the UK. Now, those regulations have various specific requirements within them. One of those is a requirement for training. Now, hand in hand with that requirement for training, there are also requirements for competence of people that work within this sector. If we take a little look back at the history of BoHS, BoHS are responsible for thousands of asbestos qualifications that have been awarded over the years. In fact, more than 50,000 asbestos-related qualifications. BoHS qualifications are also referenced within HSE guidance. The qualifications offered by BoHS have predominantly been sort of technical based. They've looked at people that carry out surveys to identify asbestos within buildings, people that would do analytical work, so they have a strong technical focus. We also have the P405, which is a management of asbestos in buildings. Now, you may wonder, management of asbestos, why do we need that? Why do we need to manage our asbestos in our buildings? Well, I've already touched up partly on this, but asbestos was used in the UK as far back as the 1880s, right through and up until sort of 2000, and also slightly beyond. We do have sort of like the peak usage between the sort of like the 50s, 60s, 70s and into the 1980s. So as a result, we do have tens of millions of tons of asbestos remaining within the UK. Asbestos has been widely reported as the greatest single cause of work-related deaths in the UK. In fact, it's already been recognised that we will probably never ever see another asbestos issue or another material that will cause the same problems as asbestos have to the workforce. As I've already mentioned, we have more than 5,000 deaths each year within the UK. So if we look at this whole aspect of managing asbestos, there is a specific regulation, Regulation 4, or commonly referred to as the duty to manage. This regulation has probably three key principal concepts. First concept is establish if you've got any asbestos present. Then identify the risk that asbestos presents, and then introduce items to manage that identified risk to ensure that no one is exposed to asbestos. Those are the foundations for asbestos management, which on face value probably sounds quite easy, probably sounds quite straightforward. And in reality, principle 1 and 2 probably are relatively easy to achieve. It's the third one, it's the management of the identified risk that is usually problematic. If you bear in mind, this regulation applies to all organisations and all workplaces. And I'm sure you can appreciate that each organisation will be different from another organisation. The workplace will be different, the workforce will be different, the types of asbestos products that are there will be different. So each of those aspects will require different management options. So if we stay with that theme of duty to manage, we then look at all these myriad of organisations and workplaces. There are tens of thousands that have responsibilities within the workplace to manage asbestos. This isn't the role of just one specific person. The regulations are sort of quite clear in the fact that there are numerous people that have a role to play within each organisation. So it's true to say asbestos management is extremely complex, often involves multiple people in multiple roles within each organisation. I then go back to some of the comments I mentioned earlier about competency, which is littered throughout all our sort of references within legislation. How do we ensure someone is competent to manage asbestos? I've already mentioned there are thousands of different roles. Does one training or one qualification fit all? We've looked at this, and after sort of great deliberation, I think the answer to that is probably no. There isn't one specific training or one qualification that would really target everybody that needs to be covered. So with that in mind, what do we propose for the future? The future is a new suite of qualifications aimed at those with specific responsibilities for managing asbestos. But then looking at that further on, it will also target the different roles. We've referred to this new suite of qualifications as the DSuite or the duty holder suite, just to try and emphasise that these qualifications are aimed at a completely different group of people in comparison to the, let's call it the historical asbestos qualifications. The ones that I mentioned previously, where we have qualifications for people that carry out surveys or people that carry out analysis, analytical works, works to let you know that an area is safe to reoccupy following asbestos removal. These ones are now aimed at those people that work within organisations that will come into contact with asbestos in some shape or form, so therefore will have a responsibility. If we now look at that DSuite, we have the D407, which is the management of asbestos in premises, specifically the duty holder requirements. This is an advanced development qualification. It focuses quite heavily on asbestos management plans, but it also builds on the knowledge that a candidate will have gained from having taken the P405, which I mentioned earlier on. You may wonder what an asbestos management plan is. If we look at that in its simplistic terms, an asbestos management plan is the document which an organisation must have. It is a legal requirement, but that document sets out how an organisation identifies its asbestos, identifies the risk posed by it and assesses it, and it then also identifies how that risk will be controlled, whether it's for employees, contractors, visitors. It also has to look at how it will be controlled when you carry out planned work, such as maintenance works. It may well be refurbishment works. It also looks at reactive work, including emergency situations. So how would you control the risk? But it's quite specific as well that the management plan must identify the roles of individuals within an organisation and what their responsibilities are. Now, if we look at the D407, you will probably find that this particular qualification is aimed at people where they will know that they are specifically responsible for managing asbestos on behalf of their employer. That will be their main or probably only role. They may be referred to as the asbestos manager or the asbestos coordinator, but asbestos is well and truly enshrined within what they do every single day. They will be involved or required to produce the management plan, building the checks and balances so that they can make sure that plan has been implemented, it's effective, they go back and they check it periodically. So to a certain extent, that category of individual will already have a good knowledge on asbestos. But I've already mentioned previously, asbestos management isn't down to one individual. Everybody has a part to play in it. So what about others who might be involved in the processes for managing asbestos? How do they understand what their requirements, their legal obligations are, and how do you translate that into a practical action? Well, we have considered that, we have taken that on board. And also, how do they know that asbestos will be part and parcel of their role? Because the group of people that I'm referring to, asbestos won't be something that they would normally do sort of day in, day out. It will be probably incidental to their sort of like normal role. To give you an example, we're probably talking about people such as estates managers, contract managers, project managers, or even caretakers. Now, with those in mind, we have developed a new qualification. This is the D413, Asbestos Management Practicalities and Awareness. This qualification provides an overall awareness of what the asbestos regulations require and how within that type of work role you would actually introduce that. For example, if we take the simple role, let's say, of a caretaker will be doing all sorts of daily tasks. Now, what happens on an occasion where a worker comes to site to carry out some work? They report to the caretaker. The caretaker needs to have an understanding as to what does he have to provide to that person before he allows them to work. What asbestos information does he need to provide? That will vary depending on the organisation that he works for, because depending on the age of the buildings or what asbestos that they have in there will affect the information he would need to provide. Similarly, if we looked at a project manager, somebody who's maybe managing a refurbishment project, yes, that will differ quite dramatically from maybe what the caretaker has provided. They may need to do something far more intrusive, far more far-reaching, but without being given the tools, the knowledge, the awareness of looking at how does it actually apply to their job on a day-to-day basis, they may not understand that they even have a part to play in this. The D413 will actually provide all that background information. Now, the D413 is an online course, so it allows the individual to learn at their own pace as and when time permits. So you can dip in and out of it. The whole qualification at the end of each small section has little exercises, little quizzes to test your knowledge and the fact that have you understood that section? If not, you can go back and have a look at it again. The learning and assessment process is there to aid the practical knowledge of the individual. The time pressures are removed because even though there will be an assessment at the end, the individual has the opportunity to go away, have a look at the question, do a little bit more reading if they feel the need to, come back, revisit it and upload their answer. This isn't a qualification just to test somebody's ability to maybe memorize information. It's to be able to apply it practically in their day-to-day life. So if we then carry on, because I did mention it was a suite of qualifications, what about others? Are there others who may need to know about asbestos that won't be their main role? So we've talked about, maybe the asbestos manager. We've talked about people, they may be just managing works on site. What about somebody who might have overall responsibility for an organisation? What about the person who might control the purse strings? So yes, we have considered those as well. And with that in mind, we also have the D412. This is the senior management responsibilities for managing asbestos. So these are the people that will sit further up the management structure. The people who make the decisions on maybe funding that gets released. So they have an understanding as to why you might need money for something or why you might need to carry out work in a particular way. It's to comply with the regulations. So without them having that knowledge, they wouldn't understand and may say no. If they do say no, they will be saying no with that enhanced knowledge and whatever that might bring with it. So having had a look at that, all the DSuite qualifications will be delivered through online training and assessment. So these qualifications are aimed and targeted at different groups of individuals within organisations to give a sufficient spread and also to give a good enough understanding of the responsibility on each of those sort of groups of workers. I'd like to thank you for your time for listening, but if you would like some more information, please feel free to go onto the BoHS website or send an email to qualifications@bohs.org. Thank you.